Hi, welcome back to Fresh Faces New Ideas. My name is David, and if you like the channel and want to continue to support me, please like and subscribe this video. Please follow me on Twitter at Faces Ideas, and you can listen to me at the Center Left Radio podcast. Now, I know I've been gone for a while, so we're going to cover the Biden speech. Now, for anyone who was on Twitter and watched the reaction to the speech before seeing the speech like I did originally, you would have thought he came out and basically fell down the stairs like he did going up on Air Force One. However, after having watched that speech, I actually thought it was a pretty solid speech. So we're going to go over to it. So it's an hour long, but I'm going to break it into different segments. So this is going to be about the first 13 minutes of the speech, and then we'll have other videos covering the rest of it, and then I'll link them all together. Okay? So let's get started here.
On vaccinations and a few other topics.
Okay, so this particular clip comes in a few seconds after he started. He's saying, I just want to give you an update, and that's where we are for here.
Priorities for the American people. First, on vaccinations. On December 8th, I indicated that I hope to get 100 million shots in people's arms in my first 100 days. We met that goal last week by day 58, 42 days ahead of schedule. Now today I'm setting a second goal, and that is we will, by my 100th day in office, have administered 200 million shots.
So this is actually going to be helped by a lot by the fact that the states are actually opening up their administration of shots. I think it's like 41 states are currently on pace to hit his May 1st deadline of everyone is eligible to get a vaccine if they want it. So that'll help him a lot, and that'll help open it up. So I keep saying this over and over again. I know there's some questions about testing because they haven't tested it directly on pregnant women and little children. They're currently testing on little children. But if you are not one of those two groups, go get your shot. You want to go back to normal? This is how we get back to normal. Go get the vaccine.
In people's arms. That's right, 200 million shots in 100 days. I know it's ambitious, twice our original goal, but no other country in the world has even come close, not even close to what we are doing. I believe we can do it. And today, we made a historic investment in reaching the hardest hit and the most vulnerable communities, the highest risk communities, as a consequence of the virus, by investing an additional $10 billion in being able to reach them. I also set a goal before
So before it goes to this is something I talked about in the past, but I think this will have actually better long-lasting consequences for just the country in general. So part of the problem is that we have these things called food deserts in this country, where it's just very difficult to get areas of food where they don't really have access to supermarkets and stuff. So this also applies to Medicare. So one of the ways that they're dealing with this is having roving vaccination spots where they can just send cars and stuff out to these more rural areas where it's harder to get vaccines and stuff. Now, part of my hope is that with his infrastructure bill that they're still debating on how much it's going to be, what's in it, is we see this type of expansion for everything, so that there's more of a focus on getting food to these food desert areas and more medicine and more places, pharmacies and stuff, so these places don't have to suffer like this. So one of the best things that we've learned about this is where our economy and where our country is weakest. So hopefully part of the investment that he's pushing into it is to food deserts and to medicine deserts.
Took office of getting a majority of schools in K through 8 fully open in the first 100 days. Now, thanks to the enormous amount of work done by our administration, educators, parents, local, state education officials, and leaders, recent Department of Education survey shows that nearly half of the K through 8 schools are open now full-time, 5 days a week for in-person learning.
And look, I've said this since the beginning of my channel, and I've said this before. The best way to get the people in is to get the teachers vaccinated. The teachers are the ones who are afraid that the kids are going to give it to them and that they will pass it on to their elderly parents. So, yes, it helps that we'll give the teachers vaccination. That'll help push it out. This thing about having it being 3 feet is good, because part of the problem with the schools is there's just not enough room to put them in all of the, to spread them out the 6 feet distance, because the rooms aren't big enough.
Not yet a majority, but we're really close, and I believe in the 35 days left to go, we'll meet that goal as well. As of yesterday, more than 100 million payments of $1,400 have gone into people's bank accounts. That's real money in people's pockets, bringing relief instantly almost. And millions more will be getting their money very soon. One final note. Since we passed the American Rescue Plan, we're starting to see new signs of hope in our economy. Since it was passed, a majority of economic forecasters have significantly increased their projections on the economic growth.
So I don't have all these numbers that he's going to say in front of him, but we know from a fact, we know this from study after study, that if you want to grow the economy, it makes more sense to put money in the bottom. There was most recently in the last couple months a study that said 50 years of trickle-down economics doesn't work. So this is why having this particular bill that focuses on the middle and lower class people instead of the top 1% who got the majority of the first COVID bill will help increase the economy. Also, the other thing is the child tax credit. Apparently, the way they're doing it, it was originally thought of as like a monthly stipend, but apparently it's going to be a chunk stipend for every couple of months. So if you're one of the people who qualify for the child tax credit, whether you have one kid or two kids or whatever the variation of it that you qualify for, make sure you know how you're actually going to get that money so that you don't budget it inappropriately in the future. Because it's not going to be, okay, it was $3,600, so each month I'm getting $300. It's, oh, maybe I'm getting $900 for 3 months. So you have to make sure you pay attention to that prior to budgeting what you expect from this child tax credit.
That's going to take place this year. They're now projecting it will exceed 6%, a 6% growth in GDP. And just this morning, we learned that the number of people filing for weekly unemployment insurance fell by nearly 100,000 persons. It's the first time in a year the number has fallen below the pre-pandemic high. So there are still too many Americans out of work, too many families hurting.
I mean, this is true. Like, we basically had somewhere between 700,000 plus people file for unemployment weekly since new filings for unemployment weekly since for the past year. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, part of the problems, as I've mentioned, and actually John Oliver did a really good piece on this, was the way that our unemployment system is set up. It's designed not to give people the help because that's perceived as the goal. As I have less people on unemployment, so I'm doing a really good job because they can't qualify for it, or it's incredibly difficult to. So, look, it's good that people are not filing for unemployment anymore.
And they still have a lot of work to do. But I can say to you, the American people, help is here and hope is on the way. Now I'll be happy to take your questions. Zeke, Associated Press.
Thank you, Mr. President. You mentioned your progress on COVID-19. I'd like to ask you about some of the other issues facing your presidency. One of the defining challenges you face in the coming months is how to deliver on your promise to Americans on issues like immigration reform, gun control, voting rights, climate change. All of those right now are facing stiff, united opposition from Republicans on Capitol Hill. How far are you willing to go to achieve those promises that you made to the American people?
Okay. Just before you answer this, it's not only Republicans who are the opposition to this. So far, for the immigration bill, the gun control bill, H.R. 1, and I believe the Equality Act, Joe Manchin has spoken out against. So keep in mind, Joe Manchin is currently the swing vote because he's the one who says, I'm willing to torpedo every single piece of legislation. But any single senator can torpedo any single legislation if it requires a 50-vote threshold. So Joe Manchin has currently come out against basically every single thing that the House has passed. Most recently was the gun control one, and he said he wants to go back to his 2013 bill with Pat Toomey, which couldn't get passed then, and now the situation has gotten worse. So now he won't do this. Look, HR 8 and HR 1446 are background check bills. They expand background checks, and they close the Charleston loophole, which is how that guy shot up that church. So if you don't support those, which don't take any guns away, be very clear, they do not take your guns away. All they do is expand background checks. I mean, what are you supporting, Joe?
I'm good. Look, when I took office, I decided that it was a fairly basic, simple proposition, and that is I got elected to solve problems. And the most urgent problem facing the American people, I stated from the outset, was COVID-19 and the economic dislocation for millions and millions of Americans. And so that's why I put all my focus in the beginning. There are a lot of problems, but all my focus on dealing with those particular problems. And the other problems we're talking about, from immigration to guns and the other things you mentioned, are long-term problems. They've been around a long time. And what we're going to be able to do, God willing, is now begin one at a time to focus on those as well. And whether it's immigration or guns or a number of other problems that face the country. But the fundamental problem is getting people some peace of mind so they can go to bed at night and not stare at the ceiling wondering whether they lost their health insurance, whether they're going to lose a family member, whether they're going to be in a position where...
Okay, so there's a couple things here. Yes, it's good that this is the bill that he passed. This was his must-pass bill. He said, I'm going to do 1.9 trillion. He did 1.9 trillion, which was good. The problem with taking all these things one at a time is you're going to spend a month or two fighting for each single one. Unless you do something about the filibuster, then you can't do it. And here's the thing with the filibuster. The argument that, oh, you're just going to be able to ram through it without parties is if you eliminate the filibuster, which appears that he doesn't want to do, you will actually make elections have consequences because it's irrelevant that Joe Biden won if he can't pass anything. With a filibuster, it doesn't matter, as long as you win the majority of the country, which is 50 plus 1, you can do your agenda. Instead, the minority can hold back the majority's agenda, and this has been done time and time again. So I get it. Look, you want to do these things one at a time, but if you really want to be this FDR style president, or if you compare your legacy to Obama, which is, according to reports and him talking to historians, he wants to have a better legacy than Obama, there's just fundamental facts that you have to do. And one of them is change the way the filibuster functions.
They're going to lose their home because they can't pay their mortgage, or the millions of people are going to get thrown out of their homes because of the inability to pay their rent. So we're going to move on these one at a time, try to do as many simultaneously as we can, but that's the reason why I focused as I have. And here's the deal. I think my Republican colleagues are going to have to determine whether or not we want to work together, or they'll decide that the way in which they want to proceed is to just decide to divide the country.
It's the latter. They've made no indication that they're willing to help on any single thing. So far, the only Republican response to any of his bills was the $600 billion COVID bill that was woefully inadequate. So all they do is just whine and complain about all these things that Biden's doing. They just blame him for everything. They have no solutions. It's just complain. There's no willingness. The most down-to-earth, moderate Republican that you can get to possibly come to your side was maybe Mitt Romney, and so far there's nothing. Like, even their bill for minimum wage is wildly inaccurate. So they're not going to help you, Joe. They've made it very clear.
Continue the politics of division.
Actually, it's even worse than this, because there are still Republicans who won't even say he won. So they're just not going to help.
But I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to move forward and take these things as they come.
To follow up, Mr. President, can your presidency be a success if you can't make progress on those four challenges: climate change, immigration reform, gun control, voting rights?
Well, I plan on making progress on all of them, but that's going to be for the American people to decide.
So, 4 challenges right now. He said gun control, immigration, climate change, and voting rights. Of those, the most pressing of the latter two are climate change and voting rights. So as I will cover later, the Georgia bill was passed. There's currently 250 plus bills to curb votings across the country, and climate change is an existential threat that we're just literally on a timeline. So therefore, it's more pressing. A lot of these things can be done simultaneously. A lot of these things don't need massive overhauls to fix. Climate change and voting is done in HR 1 and SR 1, which they'll talk about in 2 weeks when they get back. So they're not even in session for another 2 weeks. So that they could clear that one up in one bill. I think part of his infrastructure bill does have to do with like Green New Deal policies that would help deal with climate change. The immigration stuff is going to be a lot more complicated because of how much is going to have to change, and gun control is going to be a much bigger fight as well. So right now, my hope would be climate change and voting rights, because if you make sure that you have the ability to fairly have an election decided by the people, you can continue to deal with other issues in the future.
I think, I doubt whether, maybe you did, maybe others did. I thought, many of you thought there was no possibility of my getting the plan I got passed without any Republican votes. Pretty big deal. Got passed. Growing the economy. People's lives are changing.
It did get passed, but let's remember, it is significantly worse than it could have been. It is worth mentioning every single time that they talk about this bill. Every single part that they compromised with Joe Manchin on is made significantly worse by that compromise. $15 minimum wage, the unemployment benefits are the two biggest examples. So, yeah, it's very obvious that the Republicans have no desire to work with him when 75% of the country, including a majority of Republican voters, supported this bill and not a single one voted for it. So there's that.
So let's see what happens. All I know, I've been hired to solve problems, not create division. Okay, how about Yamiche?
Thanks so much, Mr. President. You've said over and over again that immigrants shouldn't come to this country right now. This isn't the time to come. That message is not being received. Instead, the perception of you that got you elected as a moral, decent man is the reason why a lot of immigrants are coming to this country and entrusting you with unaccompanied minors. How do you resolve that tension? And how are you choosing which families can stay and which can go, given the fact that even though with Title 42, there are some families that are staying? And is there a timeline for when we won't be seeing these overcrowded facilities run by CPB when it comes to unaccompanied minors?
So there's a lot there. Now, keep in mind, some of the only changes that Joe Biden has made is he removed the Remain in Mexico policy, and he's changed how Title 42 works. Now, Title 42 is the emergency act that the Trump administration was using to say that because of COVID, we will not allow anybody into the country. And if you come here, we will deport you immediately. So what Joe Biden did was he said, we will not deport minors. So if you come as a family, we're still going to send you away. But if you're an unaccompanied minor, we're going to take care of you. Now, part of the problem was there was already a backlog of people in Mexico because of the Remain in Mexico policy. So that plus the yearly migration that currently happens at this time anyway, plus all the other mitigating factors that are going on in that area of the world, led to this spike. Now, there were certainly things that Joe Biden was not prepared for, which is why we've seen such a disaster at the border with these facilities. So that is clearly their fault there.
Well, look, I guess I should be flattered. People are coming because I'm the nice guy. That's the reason why it's happening. That I'm a decent man, or however it's phrased. That that's why they're coming, because Biden's a good guy. Truth of the matter is, nothing has changed. As many people came, 28% increase in children to the border in my administration, 31% in the last year in 2019 before the pandemic in the Trump administration.
Right. So this is where you have to get all the statistics to compare to. So if anyone you see comparing them between this year and last year is just a ridiculous statistic because of the pandemic shifts everything. It's best compared to 2 years ago. So I would have to find exactly where this number came from, the 29% to the 31%. But I'm inclined to believe that's an accurate number.
It happens every single solitary year. There is a significant increase in the number of people coming to the border in the winter months of January, February, March. It happens every year. In addition to that, there is and by the way, does anybody suggest that there was a 31% increase under Trump because he was a nice guy and he was doing good things at the border? That's not the reason they're coming. The reason they're coming is that it's the time they can travel with the least likelihood of dying on the way because of the heat in the desert, number one. Number two...
Now, so what he's about to do is go into an in-depth discussion about what is actually happening, but that's actually what he said is a really good point. You know, did anyone say that there's a massive increase under Trump because he was a nice guy? No, Trump's policies were inhuman. The family separation policy was designed to be as inhuman as possible. It was designed to be as cruel as possible to make sure that people didn't come. And it didn't work because they're not coming because they're here to do drugs or they're here to just destroy American society. They're coming because there's mitigating factors back at home. And he's going to go into this.
They're coming because of the circumstances in country. In country. The way to deal with this problem, and I started to deal with it back when I was United States Senator, Vice President, putting together a bipartisan plan of over $700 million to do with the root causes of why people are leaving. What did Trump do? He eliminated that funding. He didn't use it. He didn't.
Now, this is a very important point because a lot of this is going to be covered by Republicans, and their argument is, oh, why are we spending so much money to help these other countries when we don't spend vets at home? This is a straw man argument because every time they push to help vets, they call it socialism. But the other thing is, we have the resources to help both. We just choose not to allocate them correctly because we don't gather all the resources from the people who have the resources that we should be taking advantage of. But the goal is, he's right. If you start fixing the problems in their countries, they're going to be less likely to come here. Now, one of the problems is Honduras was just hit by 2 massive hurricanes. And that's a big reason why the people are coming here, is because of the economic disasters and the other things that are bothering these countries. So he's right. Eliminating this aid does help lead to a higher increase in people attempting to cross the border.
Do it. And in addition to that, what he did, he dismantled all the elements that exist to deal with what had been a problem and has been continued to be a problem for a long time.
Now, he's right. I covered this in my other immigration video. There was over 1,000, I think it was between 1,000 and 4,000 changes that the Trump administration made to immigration, just laws and rules and the way it functioned, in order to slow it down and enable this backlog. So that's part of the problem, because they broke a lot of the things that weren't even working functionally to begin with. Just to get back to where we were pre-Trump is going to be a hurdle. And then trying to move forward from there is going to be an even further hurdle.
He, in fact, shut down the number of beds available. He did not fund HHS to get the children out of those Border Patrol facilities where they should not be and not supposed to be more than a few days, a little while. But he dismantled all of that. And so what we're doing now is attempting to rebuild the system that can accommodate what is happening today. And I'd like to think it's because I'm a nice guy, but it's not. It's because of what's happened every year. Let me say one other thing on this. If you take a look at the number of people who are coming, the vast majority, the overwhelming majority of people coming to the border and crossing are being sent back. Thousands, tens of thousands of people who are over 18 years of age and single people, one at a time coming, have been sent back, sent home. We're sending back the vast majority of the families that are coming. We're trying to work out now with Mexico their willingness to take more of those families back. But that's what's happening. They're not getting across the border. And those who are coming across the border who are unaccompanied children, we're moving rapidly to try to put in place what was dismantled, as I said. For example, of all the children who are coming across the border, over 70% are either 16 or 17 years old. We're not talking about people ripping babies from mothers' arms or little 3-year-olds standing on the border. Less than, I think it's 1.5% fall in the category of the very young. So what we're doing is we're providing for the space, again, to be able to get these kids out of the Border Patrol facilities, which no child, no one should be in any longer than 72 hours. And today, I went to, for example, I used all the resources available to me, went to the Defense Department.
So what he's talking about, the 72 hours, is the Flores ruling that says you can't detain them for more than 72 hours. Now, this is something the Trump administration tried to remove. Currently, I think he's actually a little bit over the 72-hour mark just because there's such an influxes in and they're still trying to sort through them as quickly as possible. So we have to keep an eye on as it goes. If we're talking, 6 months from now and there's still, a huge, massive backlog of these kids and they're in there for 5, 7, 10 days, then we have more of a problem.
And the Secretary of Defense has just made available Fort Bliss, 5,000 beds. Be immediately available, 5,000 beds in the Texas border. So we're building back up the capacity that should have been maintained and built upon, that Trump dismantled. It's going to take time. And the other thing we're doing, I might add, am I giving you too long an answer? Because if you don't want the
Now, this is a terrible statement. Hold on.
detail.
This is a terrible statement. Why would you stop talking? Look, when he did in the debate, it was kind of dumb anyway, but during the debates, they technically have a time limit. You're the president, bro. You can go into as much depth as you want about anything. The more in depth you go to these details, the better, because Donald Trump had barely a baseline understanding of any detail of any type of anything. He just had like a baseline understanding of just anything. So the fact that Joe Biden can coherently argue about different in-depth points of his policies is a plus, and he should do that.
No, but I mean, I don't know how much detail you want about immigration. Maybe I'll stop there and finish.
My follow-up question is...
Okay, so I'm going to cut this one off here, and we'll go back to just to wrap up, and then we'll go to the next one. So that was interesting. So a lot of what he was pointing out is like, here's, how we've done well on COVID. This is how the American Rescue Plan has helped people. And now we're going to talk about immigration. And like I've said a bunch of times, they have definitely failed in preparing for this surge. But the surge is not because of Joe Biden. It is a combination of factors from the Trump policies, the yearly influx, and other things that led to this surge. So if you like this video, please like and subscribe. Please follow me on Twitter @FacesIdeas, and I will see you in the next one.